Good evening and welcome to the second episode of Listen Here. We are so happy to welcome you back and we're excited to continue our exploration of the composer Beethoven, whose 250th birthday we're celebrating this year. With me tonight, of course, is someone that needs no introduction, and that is music director Rafael Payare. Welcome, Rafael.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. This is great. This is so exciting. I can't believe it's already past 1 week since the last episode.
I know, and you've been hard at work on this one, but tonight we actually hear your performance with the orchestra of the Eroica, a piece you did with them earlier this year.
Yes, indeed. And also tonight we will have one of the musicians that is actually going to be joining us live. And this is Benjamin Jaber, our wonderful first horn of the orchestra that is going to be joining us as well in here. Hi, Ben.
So one of the things I love about this is that we look at music from many sides in these episodes, from the construction side of the composer's mind, from the technical side of the performers who recreate this music, but also, especially in Beethoven, from the human side and what it teaches us and what is about his internal life that is timeless and is still relevant today. So with that, let's get started.
So the obvious place to start with this symphony is with the nickname that Beethoven gave to the symphony. Eroica, the Heroic Symphony. And that's where, to me, where it gets really, really interesting. Because of this, what in Beethoven's day was this modern idea of the hero, we have to remember that Napoleon dominated the age like probably no other human being. He was thought of as the man who was the master of the known world.
Yeah. And we could see it now that time has passed. We could see how Beethoven was all the time trying to aim, which was, very much of the Age of Enlightenment thing, something greater all the time. That is not what you see, but it could become what it could be a little bit more. And of course, Napoleon was doing this whole thing for the French Revolution that before was going to conquer the world, it was to, push things forward to make the world itself a better place. And then all of a sudden, he crowned himself emperor. And all of that in his mind was like, he wasn't going to let that man that he kind of worshiped, and it was the staple during that time, to take away the dream of that the world could be a much better place with or without him. So that's why it's like, okay, you are not what I thought you were going to be, but we could still keep pushing and keep going forward.
And what becomes really interesting with Beethoven is Beethoven has an identification with Napoleon. Quite early, he starts to see himself as the Napoleon of music. But then it seems to me, Beethoven invents a heroic language. As the Napoleon of music, he invents a new way of using music. Because you could take one bar of the Eroica Symphony and you could say, oh, well, Mozart did things like this in his music, or Haydn did things like this in his music. But their music does not demand that we identify with the hero. And it seems to me that you are number one witness, Mr. Payare, not because you are a conductor, but because you're a horn player. And it seems to me that the horns and the way he was writing for the horns took a huge leap forward in this symphony.
Going with the horn play, the way he wrote, of course, Mozart already always put some scherzo or some trios, always put a little bit of solo for the horn. But in here, Beethoven uses 3 of them, which is very unusual. Completely unusual, so unusual that even now we could have that. And the heroic part was an utopic state that he was pursuing and putting into paper. And when he takes that first movement and stretch it in a way that no one could have done it before. And there's an anecdote that might be false or true, or there are some letters or things that when Haydn heard the symphony, he kind of left in a rage, and then said, like, it's never going to be the same from now on. it breaks the whole thing, and the music, it opens a completely different world. I mean, when he goes into the repetition and goes into the second theme, instead of changing into the normal key, he goes to F, and it's like, wait, what was that? And it's absolutely beautiful, how it's never done before, and even how he's going to get the big recapitulation and use the second horn in a triple pianissimo. And then we go again to the dimension. Never, no one has done it before, and it's opened a completely different world, and it's start aiming that utopic state of the heroism that you would need to hear it because it's there, and you somehow, you, like you said, you don't, might be the composer, might be a utopic figure that you could have in your own head, that it might be that, you know, the hero that is self-made is going to conquer and make the world a better place. So it's fascinating. It's really just thinking about it, I guess goosebumps on these changes. Yeah, it's my God.
Well, there also seems to me something really important we have to understand about the horns as well. I'm pushing you as an ex-horn player, because in Germanic culture, above all, that horns were associated with hunting, with the outside world, with the sound of nature, with riding of horses, with the arrival of the post, thinking of Schubert.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to remember that in German, it's called a Waldhorn, a forest horn.
Exactly.
Already in the 18th century, the idea of the forest, you see that in Schiller, you see that in Goethe, the idea of the forest is deeply associated in people's imagination with the idea of the German people, German culture, German civilization. I mean, I don't know, you would know more about why this is, but years ago, because I have another life as a composer, years ago, I wrote a piece for the open air with trumpets and horns and all sorts of instruments. And I made a very interesting discovery, which is you could hear the horns from miles away, much further away than trumpets, which would seem to be louder.
Yeah.
I suppose it's because of the shape of the instrument, but it's a non-directional instrument. The sound spreads, whereas a trumpet comes straight for you.
Exactly. Yeah, it has to do with the overtones that exist already in nature. It's somehow the horn, it enables it. I mean, like you were saying, with you could know with the Alp horns that they have this long instrument and they kind of communicate from one mountain to the other, and going into the forest part, that it was always for romanticism, you know, it was always a wonder and a good thing. You go to the forest and you might find yourself enchanted, or there will be something greater and higher that would have that. And actually that was the way of communicating. Even, I mean, not only in the Swiss Alps, but on the Austrian Alps, and even in the part with Germany, you could hear the hunting horns, not trumpets, but hunting horns come across, and then you could know that they could come from that direction or the other direction, and has been used for, you know, centuries and centuries, and to encapsulate that into the instrument and then trying to put that sense into the utopic part of the Heroica is just mesmerizing.
Yes. Well, I want to introduce again, I have the pleasure of having here with us tonight our principal horn player, Ben Jepper. Hi, Ben.
Hello, hello. It's great to see everyone. Great to see you, Martha and Rafael. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. This is fabulous.
Yes, and this
is
is
to have a little chat.
Yes, absolutely. And it's great that we're having here, and you have a little surprise for us that now in the video that we're talking about the Alpenhorn, and as a matter of fact, you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I watched that segment there, and I actually have a little show and tell that I decided to go ahead and indulge and get this out. I am the proud owner of this 12-foot, 3-inch long Swiss Alpenhorn. And get some of the detail there with this gorgeous carving. This was made in Canada for me back in 2005. And I actually had it delivered to me in Aspen, Colorado, where I was at the music festival that summer, and it was delivered to me there. And I spent the ensuing 5, 6, 7, 3 more summers after that, hiking in the mountains and just using it to its fullest possible mountain effect, which was a great joy. It was a great thing to have. And, it makes just a gorgeous sound. And from the Eroica Symphony, you can, of course, play this little tune. You can even skip up to the little partial above,
Of
So
course.
who's to know if that's where it came from, but it's a lovely sound.
Yeah.
And it's fun to play. And as a horn player, it's actually very therapeutic to play as well, because if you breathe and blow very easily into it to get the right sound from it, as you know, you have to be completely relaxed to get a nice relaxed sound from it. So
And you don't have to use your right hand for once. So you
no,
just blow on, that's it.
no, and it's very honest as well. Like the sound you get is what comes out at the end. So there's no hiding behind the hand or anything.
That's wonderful. The sound with that, and it's funny because in Switzerland, in all of the fondue house, for some reason, they have that for people to try. But it's always, you could see when people are just starting to get a little bit crazy on the head, they just start playing the alpenhorn horn. It doesn't sound as good as you, but it's always fun to hear. Yeah.
I was inspired. I have a horn player friend at the St. Louis Symphony who is an aficionado of them, and I paid a visit to him a while ago, years ago, before I got my own, and I had never tried one. There was, lo and behold, a little club of guys that he was friends with who all played, and they would read quartets, and there's little groups of guys around, people around who have them. And typically in Switzerland, legend has it that the original alpenhorns were built to be the length of 2 grown men stood end to end from head to toe, which was supposed to have approximated to around 11 feet 6 inches, which in modern measurement and in modern acoustic, what have you, you wind up with a horn that's actually a little shorter than this one. So it puts you in the key of F sharp. And to this day in Switzerland, that's like the way that they make them. That's like the only way they play alpenhorns is F sharp in Switzerland. And an F, to have one in F like this is purely a North American thing for horn players, to be familiar with the key of F and to have a horn in F. Just
Right.
so that's what I wound up with.
Yeah. It's it would be good to remind everybody that is actually joining us today that they could write some questions and to get for anything that you would like to know a little bit more of the alpenhorn, of what is to play in the orchestra, or about the symphony. Anything will be completely open. And I think it would be good that now that we have heard the sound of the alpenhorn, maybe we could just go and hear how Beethoven introduced this in his wonderful way into the first movement.
Yeah, well,
I was just saying something about freedom and the idea of political change, which is what you were talking about before. And this was also, of course, the great age in German culture of the Bildungsroman, the novel in which a character develops as a human being. They change themselves, they become somebody different, and they learn that changing yourself allows the possibility of changing the world. And I wanted to ask you about this enormous form, because there is this famous theme, horn-like arpeggio, yam, bam, bam, bam. And then at the very, very beginning, it refuses to grow. It's constantly, the theme is always being snatched away. It's as though he's giving it to you like a Bach fugue subject or something. He gives you the incipit, and then every time it comes back, it's a little bit longer, but it's still not the complete theme. And the very first time he gives it to you, goes yam bam bam ba yada ba bam ba bam, and there's that C sharp. What is a C sharp doing there in the key of E flat? It's like, wow. Well, of course, what it is there's a dissonance, and it's the obstacle. And in the Bildungsroman, the hero is somebody who has to overcome obstacles in order to become a better person and make the world a better place. And actually that's C sharp, and sometimes it's a D flat, becomes like another character in the whole symphony. Every single movement, that note appears like it's going, whoo, I'm watching you from a different, behind the trees in the German forest or whatever.
Yeah, it's wonderful because, like you said, that C sharp, that then when you start and you have, of course, the pulse, you have the AM pum, 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 all the time going, and then every trying to reach out, and every single time that it's trying to reach out, it will come with this et forzando, you know, the parum, having the emiola coming on, and then you have the forzando over the beat itself, boom, 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 and trying to go and go, and then you have this evil or this dissonance, and when it goes into the recap, that takes another completely different twist. Then actually the C sharp becomes just a D flat, and the flute takes over and play the thing after the horns take it over. It's that, and then you feel like what it was unknown and evil now is the new you, and you settle there. And then you start like, okay, I've been verklecht, you know, I'm being transformed now. Now what am I going to do? And you just keep going, and then keep growing, and you use the orchestra. And of course, his way of using the violins and little variation to getting into that place with the coda is just a big stretch. I mean, it was the longest first movement ever written, so until there, I mean. But at that point, when the first movement ends, many symphonies of Haydn and Mozart have been already fourth movement and gone, you know, and this is just the first movement before we get into the funeral march, and then we get into the scherzo, and then the wonderful thing with variation that it's the finale.
One of the things about the rhythm I find fascinating is right at the beginning with those famous two chords, because they create already a pulse, and then that famous tune comes in, and it's in the wrong place in the pulse. The strong beats are on the weak beats, and the weak beats are on the strong beats, and so from the very first 2, 3, 4 seconds of the music, he creates this restless tension because everything is in the wrong place in relation. It's like you've fallen into a river, and the energy of the river is already sweeping you, and you can't really control it. You don't know where you are.
It's restless all the time. The moment that you relax in rhythm is stop being Beethoven. So you have this kind of, it's almost like training, you know, it's like a cardiovascular training, and this is just the first movement. It's just, what I can say is that's the most amazing feeling, especially when you have the last two chords. Boom, there's like, okay, you hit the line, because even though it's kind of very demanding physically, it's so rewarding at the same time, and you are aiming to actually get there, and you work and you feel how all these changes go into you, and then of course you bring the audience into that, but you just feel it. It's wonderful.
And that tremendous climax in that very famous moment in the middle of the development section, where he melts down the 3-time rhythm yampa pa 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 into yampa yampa yampa, and he piles 2 chords on top of one another. And actually with your brother-in-law Josh Weilerstein, he and I did an experiment in one of the Proms concerts where we did those chords and went straight from there into the famous chords from the Rite of Spring, and it's almost the same chord. Right. And there is Beethoven more than 100 years before, 110 years before, he discovered that same chord.
It's just wonderful. And the more, like when we were talking about last week about the ninth, the more you put the magnifying glass on his structure and the things that he put, it's like years ahead of everything. And then you could see how, oh, this is where Brahms got it, you know, and then, oh, this is what Bruckner did afterwards, and Mahler, and, you know, Stravinsky, everybody. And even, like you said last week, Debussy, how to put the orchestration and the whole thing. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That was thrilling. Does that bring back immediate memories from that performance?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. I could remember every second of it like it was yesterday. It's crazy. Crazy how it just could be transposed there in so fast in just a split of a second.
And so when Beethoven was writing that, what was the horn as an instrument compared to today?
Oh, it was very different. Because I mean, nowadays we have the horn that has actually valve and everything. It used to be before an instrument with no valve, and when you were going to change the key, you just change a different kind of the tube that is going to make it a little bit longer and a little bit shorter, depending on the which key do you want it to have. That's what is kind of slightly a little bit of a tease from Beethoven, that he uses a horn in E flat, and then he makes the recapitulation, but he makes it in F. That is a different kind of horn, and the way that you end up giving the last note to the flute, you have to do something different with your hand. What will you be doing with an E flat horn? But yeah, it's one of those things. Even though the modern instrument now we use different valve or piston or whatever you wanted to call it, you could still have all the harmonics that during those time they were only harmonic. You cannot go from one place to the other without having to do all the change with your hand. Before, everything was have to do with your embouchure and your lips. So it's one of those tricky things.
And a completely different sound.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, because one of the things with the sound is that we should have been playing a little bit of the natural horns, because it will be, you have the tonic, you have the third, and then the fifth, but being able to play those two notes in between, you just put the hand in a different way. So the sound is not going to sound as clear and as open as before, but it's just a completely different thing. Ben, can you play just for a second at the scale like in a natural horn?
Yeah. So I have my horn here, which has valves on it, and the Alpenhorn I was playing before actually has no valves, and it's the perfect illustration for this, because on this you get just the harmonic series. I'm not playing any valves. I'm just buzzing my lips, and then into here you get just those overtones pop out, right? And the same thing happens on here. As I gliss up and down. So in order to fill in those gaps, that doesn't sound like do, re, mi, fa, so on the piano. So in order to create notes, you had to start working with your right hand in the natural horn, the valveless horn, without all this stuff. You would have to go in order to create a scale like that. And
Wow.
the bell would have been much smaller, and this bell is much bigger, because as music got louder and orchestras got bigger, big symphonies started getting bigger and longer and louder and more impactful and more dramatic. And so you needed instruments that could keep up with that. And all this happened to all the instruments. But the natural horn bell was much smaller, and you would rarely ever put your hand at all in it except to mute it like that. So that's how he went about creating scales. And the people who were the best at this at the time were incredible virtuosos who could play very, very fast. And it was those people that all the great composers wrote for, of course. So
Fascinating.
I don't know.
Thank you, Ben. That was great improvisation.
No. Yeah, helps to have valves. I like valves. I'm a big fan of valves.
Me too.
So let's go to the next. We go on to the funeral march, the second movement of Beethoven.
Let's talk about the funeral march. It's such a beautiful movement. And I wanted to start by saying something that I suppose is a bit of context, which is Beethoven's age was a great time for formal funerals. They had these enormous ceremonies and processions with music. In Vienna, the Empress Marie Theresa, she instituted these massive grieving ceremonies where not just the members of the royal family, but important generals or whatever would lie in state, and everybody was supposed to come and process past the coffin to the sounds of music. This particular funeral march, the Eroica, sets the stage for Chopin's funeral march, for Siegfried's funeral march in Götterdämmerung, for all those funeral marches in Mahler.
Absolutely. And of course, he was always keen on the rhythm, as we said before, but this particular funeral march itself, how you start from nothing, starting with a particular mark, sotto voce, half of the voice, for strings, to say it for, singers and everything is fine, but to put an orchestra into sotto voce state, it was like also as well like, wait, you cannot do that. And it's like, yes, I can. Listen. and then you go for this, and it was always a little bit grounded, and you could see how it goes through the different stages of grieving. This funeral march in particular has something very special to me. It was the weird thing. I happened to experience something that I don't recommend or wish to anybody. But I lost my oldest brother in an accident back in 2007. And I remember I received the call. It was my brother-in-law. I was in Caracas, and this happened in Puerto La Cruz. And the comments like, what are you doing? We need you to come here. And it's like, what's happened? Well, Ivan was his name. He got an accident, but I could sense in the voice of my brother-in-law that there was something off. It's like, okay, but I was like, wait, just get back here. It's like, wait a second. What happened? It's like, well, he got an accident and he got killed in the accident. And boom, in my head, it just came the funeral march. Boom. I just went into a weird state, took a shower, called a friend, and drove to Puerto La Cruz. And the drive to Puerto La Cruz is 3 hours. The whole ride, the only thing in my head was Beethoven's funeral march. Why? I have no idea. But it always hit that sense, and you could feel how you are into procession, and you remember things that you did and you didn't do with this person, in my case. And it portrays everything. And I'm sure that he wasn't actually writing this for my brother's accident, but yet it has that ability to that you could actually embrace it and make it your own, because it's so vast. So yeah,
what you describe is so powerful, and it also takes us back to the dedication that he wrote, Per festeggiare il sovvenire d'un grand'uomo, that if the first movement is about creation, it's about going forwards, it's about development, it's a march of remembrance. As you say, we hear the different episodes of the hero's life. As we do when we go to a ceremony, we look backwards, and every aspect of the ceremony is designed like a liturgy, like a pattern, like a dance through all our memories of that person. So you could say that we have the first movement is looking forwards, it's all about marching towards the future, and then you have this huge turn. The future has to be balanced by the past, and in this slow movement, every human being lives with the future and the past. So he dramatizes the future in the first movement, and he dramatizes the past with these endless returns in the funeral march. And I thought when you said what you said about sotto voce, when are we sotto voce? We are usually told to be sotto voce when we are in a great cathedral or a sacred place. It seems to me that one of the things he's doing there is he's asking the players to imagine that they are in such a space, St. Stephen's Cathedral or wherever it happens to be, and that they are playing as you would play on that occasion, with respect and with the an attempt not to disturb everybody, because everybody has their different thoughts at this time. And so then when it erupts, it's unbearable.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that for orchestras, it's always scary place to start the funeral march. You see them freaking out. It's like, okay, we just need to play. It's like, you can't just do it with conviction, because even though it's gives you a lot of pain and grief to make the first step, so you have to not hesitate, but just have a little bit of contempt to try to being able to go, especially for the basses that have that appoggiatura. So it's on the beat, it's after the beat. It's like, no, it's on the beat, but you're going to have this, and then you could feel that kind of tension and people moving. It's great. It's great.
So we have a great big movement that's looking forward, plunging forward, and a great big movement that's looking backwards. And then we have one of these astonishing, I suppose it's probably the first great Beethoven scherzo on the model, in which he did it again in the 7th Symphony, he did it again in the 9th Symphony. Instead of it being 3 beats in a bar, like in a Haydn or Mozart minuet, it's 1 beat in a bar. So we're back to rhythm. Can you say something about that? 1 beat in a bar.
Yeah, so we have this the menuetto. Before it was 1 2 3, and then he makes, just by speeding it up, make it a 1 in a bar, but you still have the yap pop 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 pop, but a little bit. It's Beethoven, for Christ's sake. So he's like, we're going to do this my way, and he start pushing. So you have this amazing thing, and you have an oboe, and it's fantastic, because everything happens again after this unbearable movement that had been there so emotionally. He changed to the most playful, amazing rhythm, always wrestler rhythm, but at the same time so full of life. And then after you have this gaming goes to a wonderful trio that is, he display, okay, it's like, hello everybody, remember me? I'm Beethoven, and now I'm going to use not 1, not 2, not 4, but 3 horns. Listen to that. And you get into this trio that the horns take over, and then it's a completely different melody that it goes a little bit crazy, and then go back, and again, then jumps back into the scherzo. It's great. It's great.
This movement that is going to be now, the scherzo, it's so great. It's fantastic. And as I mentioned before, we have this special kind of display for us, for the home players, right? Ben, we have 3 of us playing into here. I mean, I know I played this many times, but I would like to hear from you. How is that moment for you? How is this whole thing? And as a section, what we do normally in that spot?
Oh, it's so much fun, isn't it? It's just the greatest fun. It's what it's one of the things we do best, is this sort of music. And I've heard it described differently by different teachers and different conductors and different ways of doing it. And, we so very much enjoyed the performances with your good self this past year, which were just thrilling. I remember hearing it described once, this passage, as it was meant to be the poetic image of a hunt, right, rather than like hunting music itself. It's like this distant memory of times enjoyed in the woods hunting or something. And to that effect, I think he just wanted it softer. I think he just wanted it a little less aggressive, but whoever that was. But no, I remember, I have a fond memory of this passage. Actually, I was just thinking today, I don't remember what year this was. And it's completely spooky, actually, that I'm thinking of this and remembering it now, because at the time that this happened, I don't think I was actually playing the horn seriously yet. I was in New York City on some kind of trip with my family, and my father was there, and we went into the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. I don't know if you've ever been in there, but it's the largest Gothic style cathedral in the world. This giant, and it's still being under construction. It's under construction to this day. And the New York Philharmonic was in there rehearsing. I think they were rehearsing the Beethoven Eroica, and as we got towards the end of the crossing, like towards the nave, the center of the crossing where the orchestra was, you could hear the horns. I think they were rehearsing the trio, but that was the first time I ever heard the passage. Actually, hearing that music was live before I ever heard a recording of it or anything, or knew anything about what it was. That's what I was hearing, and I remember my father pointed it out to me, and yeah, completely thrilling. And to get to play it anytime, obviously, it's just is memorable for any horn player. So, and
yes, of course, and it has this audition excerpt for the second horn as well. That is always fun. But
that's right.
Yeah,
I used to be good at the second horn part, and but after a while, I decided to leave that up to the second horn. But yeah, it's absolutely the best part. I'd say the second part is the best part in the whole piece, for sure. All the little solos and in so much of Beethoven's music, it's parts other than the first horn that are way more interesting. In the Ninth Symphony, like we were talking about last week, the fourth horn has the best part by far. Yeah,
for sure. But maybe we should actually hear how well we did, because I think we have a little token from you guys playing it at the rehearsal.
You have to forgive us. We have a super secret stash tidbit from one of our rehearsals that we very, very naughtily captured. So we hope you'll enjoy this little 45 seconds of humor and fun.
Bring me some memory. That was fun.
Absolutely. What a thrill. And all the stuff we've done together this last season was absolutely great, I thought. And but that in particular, I always really, really enjoy playing this piece and that movement. And actually I think it's great to play that passage. Certainly it's the most famous maybe for the horn section. You play that, and then the last movement comes along, which we'll talk about in a moment. But then everyone just gets to have a nice romp and sink their teeth right in, and the end of it is so exciting.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing once the big part is done, you can kind of relax and
of course
sink in some more teeth. So.
And then you have the last solo of the fourth movement, of course, that is for the whole orchestra going on. It's fantastic. This is good. Yeah, the last movement is so much fun, and it's going to be great this next video that we're going to have, because also we're going to be having our wonderful principal player Rose Lombardo on it. So it will be good if we can just dive into the fourth movement now.
We looked forward in the first movement, we looked back in the second movement, then life bursts back in, and then in this finale, we have to learn the lessons. As human beings, we have to learn the lessons. We have to learn the lesson. I'm absolutely sure that it's the same lesson as your instrument, the horn. The horn was a symbol of freedom, of the lack of aristocracy, and the same thing is true of this theme. I loved your word, utopian. It's about a future where those distinctions no longer matter, where we all feel as human beings and we feel together. A pretty important lesson for where we are right now, I would have said.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. And it's so great because it has been since the very beginning, as you say, putting the same steps, getting into the creatures of Prometheus for the last movement, but at the same time, Beethoven being Beethoven and making sure that what he was going to say has never done before. He uses the thing that Look at Me from Prometheus to resembles a little bit Haydn's Papa Haydn Surprise Symphony, you know, like pam pam pam. It's like, you see, I could also be, I also have a sense of humor, but we are going to spin it out and make this fantastic variation that goes into a completely different world. And again, started in the very first chord and ends in the last one. It's just a full ride. It's not disjoint. It's great. I mean, the coda, the coda of the, after you go into this whole thing, this whole frenzy. Again, the same thing, transform, Prometheus, the first movement, everything, and just going into this wonderful thing, and then pom pom pim pim pom pom. Then you go the rest of final that is like again, the horns, always this haunting, and it ends with the wonderful escape from the tale. It's like, here it is. Now we can move on. Let's see. Now the world is bigger. The world is way wider than what we're just seeing or we're trying to achieve. It's way wider than that. Here it is. Go for it. Fantastic.
I love your summing up what you said several times, that this is music about we could do better. We could be better. We could live in a better way.
For this episode, we wanted to talk a little bit about Eroica, and I wanted to ask you for a little bit of insight, because there's a big solo, as we know, in the fourth movement, but you can tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, preparing for any Beethoven symphony, you definitely need to like get your stamina up as a wind player. There's just a lot of energy that goes into performing one of his symphonies. You know, I guess if we talk about some of the technical challenges of it, it's kind of asking the flute player to do a display of everything. And we also play kind of like 3 different roles in such a short period of time, where we're a singing voice with the melody in the, you know, mixed in with the violins, but then in the middle section, we're like these sort of, you know, the second flute comes in and we're kind of like these like backup singers, sort of accompanying the 16th note, like virtuosity in the violins, and then it gets passed back to the flute to finish up the variation with this, you know, very virtuosic arpeggio motif. So, you know, you got to work up your technique for those moments, but also at the beginning, just it's so lyrical and magical and dolce, and of course all with the underpinnings of a rhythmic sort of structure always has to be right in place. It's such a joy for flute players to play, because in a lot of ways it's actually not very soloistic. You're almost you know, we're joining the first violins on this melody, and so we get to kind of like play around with being in that sound world of the strings. But also just where this solo happens in the symphony is such a joyous moment. And, you know, we've been through the whole symphony, and it's, you know, so emotional as we get with Beethoven. And in particular, like this solo comes right out of a very sort of stormy and heavy section, the fugue section right before this. Gets, you know, really Beethoven dramatic. And then right when this flute solo happens, it's like, you know, the first ray of sunshine that comes out of it with this like major, you know, major version of the theme.
Yeah, we were talking, when I was talking to Gerard before, we were talking about in the first movement how we have E flat, of course, and we have this C sharp that is going to take to some place, and then for the recapitulation, after we go back, then the horns come with the solo, and that C sharp becomes the flat, that it would, you know, and then the flute takes over, and it's completely like, it's normal. It wasn't a wrong note. We are now settled. It's wonderful. And that also inspired Dvorak, for instance, for his Eighth Symphony. It's kind of the solo from Dvorak in the last movement in a variation. The flute also is kind of the same thing, and the display in that solo is also tricky, isn't it? I mean, especially the breathing. It's so.
Yeah. I mean, there must have just been some really incredible flute players back then setting the standard for everybody.
Yeah, or maybe they just hate them.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I haven't thought that one before, but more recently in my years as in this position, I start to really appreciate, especially since Beethoven didn't write a lot for flute otherwise in chamber music or, I mean, any solo music really. So whenever, even if it is such a difficult moment, same with Dvorak, I'm always so grateful to just have the opportunity to play to have a composer write such amazing, even if it's just a glimpse in one movement of a symphony rather than like an entire string quartet. I'm always just like, thank you for choosing the flute for this moment.
Now I just want to walk into a concert hall and hear all of that wonderful music live. But Rafael, it's wonderful also to see all of you during this time when you're secluded and not being able to make music together, to see the live interaction with Ben tonight and the interaction you had with Rose the other day. You're all laughing and smiling. And I just think that talking about music and hearing music being made must lift your spirits at this time.
Absolutely, because I mean, making music is not just a thing that we do because it's our work that we have to go and do it. It's our way of living. It's the way that we breathe. That's what gives us oxygen to our lungs, is making music, talking about music. I mean, living through music, doing crazy things regarding the music. So it's it's always a joy. Even when times around could be looking a little bit darker, talking about music and making music, especially making music, it makes everything, a big fresh air that you could just have the most pure, like when you could inhale and you feel that everything is, all the oxygen goes to your blood and everything. It's great.
Well, and Beethoven's, as we know, Beethoven, the darkness of Beethoven, there is always this light that shines through. And I think that was very apparent in our exploration tonight.
Yeah. His way of always, wonderful thing with Beethoven, somehow it's always it's a good ending, even though it goes through different stages and many different things. It always kind of optimistic joy all the time, that it doesn't matter how much you have to suffer and to struggle or to have tension and friction, you always come out transformed and going a little bit further away, which is always great,
Well, that's certainly who you are as a human being. You look for that joy, and that came through tonight. Like Ben, you have a special affinity as a young man with Beethoven. I remember you telling me Beethoven Fifth Symphony is one of the first pieces you played in Venezuela with in El Sistema.
Yeah, I was a couple of weeks only playing, and that I got pushed into playing into the orchestra, and the first piece that I have to play was Beethoven 5, second movement. I didn't even know how to make the transpose, and I just on the spot I just have to do it. But it's also, I don't know, Beethoven has this theme for everybody, and you could kind of make it your own. But I really like the story that Ben just told us, that actually it will be great to hear what your father just texted you to tell you and put a little bit more light into what you were saying about the New York.
Yeah. He just said that I was very young at the time, that we were there. We were there by accident. There was a rehearsal going on. Kurt Mazur was conducting. I would have been maybe, who knows what age I was, 10 or 11. If I was playing the horn, it wasn't seriously yet, but that was the kind of impact hearing that made on me. And at that time, and it's just a joy to get to impart that joy to others now, and have the proper tools to do it with, you know.
And that story came to Ben from his dad, a text, which is a nice little post Father's Day celebration.
Absolutely. Happy belated Father's Day. I called him the other day.
Sweet.
Yeah. And I was just thinking of that this morning as I was thinking about what I was going to say for this tonight, because there's so many great memories that I can think of. I don't have any negative memories associated with this piece at all. You just reminded me just now, the very first time I ever played in an orchestra. You said it was Beethoven 5. For me, it was Beethoven 7. I was, what was I? I was a junior in high school, and the very first time I ever played like a serious part on a serious piece in an orchestra, in a youth orchestra, it was the summer of my junior year in high school, and I didn't know how to transpose. Had to learn it on site. Had to learn how to play high notes on site, and Beethoven has that way of bringing the people to their senses, doesn't it? Yeah.
What a wonderful way to close this evening. Next week, we will be back at 6:30 on Wednesday for one more look at Beethoven, this time his 6th symphony, his Pastoral Symphony. You can now go to Symphony Stream, where you can watch these episodes, but also where you can listen to the orchestra in playing the Eroica Symphony with Rafael Payare as part of our Symphony Stream presentations. So you can hear the piece complete. So until next week, be well, keep music in your heart, keep the San Diego Symphony in your heart. And Rafael and I both say, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely. Please stay tuned, stay safe, stay well. Thank you, Ben, for being with us, and stay tuned and see you in a week.
Thank you, Ben. And we miss you, Rose. It was great to see you on camera.
Thank you. Thank you.